I was not only the first provincial secretary of the ANC in the Free State elected by conference, I am the only woman who has been a provincial secretary since the unbanning of the ANC, and I take that very seriously because I don't like the thing of people taking themselves big because they think they are the women of first. So being the first provincial secretary of my time,
at a very young age.
Yeah, yes, I can't even remember. That to me was the fact that I was entrusted with this responsibility because somehow people believed in my leadership. They believed that I have the potential, and they believed that I have the character that can carry the organization in the Free State forward.
Let's talk about what you just said. You spoke about a need to support women because they are a majority on the continent, particularly the young people who, in terms of the population of this continent, Africa, they constitute a large chunk of the population. How do we do this? Why are you talking about this? You spoke about the issue of senior leaders, but how do you ensure that you have young leaders? Because the continent is very young.
I am not only an advocate for young people and women through the programs that I am involved with in Singapore. As an example, we do the South Africa Focus Week in Singapore that will now take place from the 24th to the 28th of September. In that program, as part of mentorship, nurturing leadership, particularly leadership from young people, we create platforms for them to interact with people from Southeast Asia. And I say Southeast Asia because Singapore is a business hub, but also a gateway into Asia. So we have developed programs that targets women and targets young people. We do this because I understand the kind of challenge that my country is faced with, but also the challenge that the African continent is faced with. As I've said in my speech earlier, 60% of our population as the African continent is constituted of people 24 years and below. The leadership age is 64. This gives you, if you were to count, you'll see that in Africa, there is a 40-year leadership gap between these young people I've referred to and those that lead them. Now, as society, what do we do? So can we conclude and say the future is African, is female and young?
Let's talk about the issue of economic diplomacy. It looks like President Ramaphosa is focusing on issues related to building South Africa's economy. As a representative of South Africa in Singapore, are there opportunities for South Africa in terms of also learning from Singapore? As you pointed out, this is an amazing country.
Singapore has a good story to tell, and I believe that South Africa too has a good story to tell. Now, in the context of our trade and investment work, one of the things that we are really pushing very hard is the fact that Singapore, because of its size and because of the fact that they do not have farms to produce food for their people, they rely on other countries to assist them with their food security. 90% of the food that the people of Singapore consume come from other countries. Now, South Africa being an agricultural country, I believe that there's great opportunities in that. South Africa trains a lot of Singaporeans in the following fields. One, we do train Singaporean bankers, and our two banks, Absa and Standard Bank, are doing a good work in that. They have a lot of collaborations with the banks in Singapore. Singapore, and I applaud them for the work that they've been doing. But why Singapore would choose South Africa to train its bankers is because South Africa has one of the oldest reserve banks, and our model of governance in the reserve bank reserve bank is revered all over the world. And this is the reason why when people think finance, when people think fintech, they immediately think about South Africa. You would be surprised, in most countries to this day, you would not have people just having access to banks. You still have the unbankable population that still use their mattresses to bank. But in South Africa, as you know, we have our banks that accommodates and what would be referred to as unbankable population. So these are some of the things that other countries are learning, and because I'm in Singapore, I know Singapore is looking at South Africa on these aspects. But also, there's a lot of exchanges in other areas, like in the military, like in the world of science. You would know that during COVID, South African scientists and Singapore scientists were collaborating on various aspects that related to that pandemic. And all of this also give you an idea that there's a lot of affinity by Singaporeans, by their government for South Africa. You have seen that just in this conference, there's a huge delegation of Singapore investors that are coming to the continent, but particularly to South Africa, to look at opportunities. Some of them are already, of course, investing in South Africa.